What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, here for an exciting little football podcast. We're talking about before going on here, this, over the last couple of weeks, you guys got some big-time football access. There's been some ACC football news as well. So we said, let's hop on here and do a little kind of state of the program podcast. Is only about, fall camp starts on July 29th, only about a month away from that. ACC kickoff's only about 3 weeks away. So football is coming in hot, and I think it's a great time to talk about a bunch of things surrounding the program and ACC as well. So before we dive into that, though, AJ, I want to give a shout out to TarHeelIllustrated.com. You see written right across the top right there. Link to our websites in the description below, guys. Come sign up. $8.33 a month. You can be a Carolina insider too. AJ took the site over in 2014. Our prices haven't changed since then. It's always been $8.33 a month. AJ, you were telling me off camera you went to get a jar of mayonnaise last week, and it's double the price it was last year. It's like $5.
I'm the shopper in our house. Yep. My wife's idea of shopping is to order, have someone else bring it. And I like
my fiance.
And mayonnaise was like $2.79 a year and a half ago. It's like $4.88 now. And I used to not always notice prices that much. So just kind of got what I had to get. Now I notice it. And I just chuckle every time because we have not gone up in price. Mm-hmm. Everything else has. So we used to joke. What did we used to say? It's like a number 8 and a candy bar or something like that.
It's like a beer too now.
Oh, yeah. I was in Alexandria and I was at a place in Old Town, and the beers were $7.50.
Yeah, if it's a craft beer, it's at least $7.
This was a Michelob Ultra. It's $7.50 a pop. So look, we're still $8.33, and right now there are no plans to raise the price. So I think it's great you'll hop on board. You get all the recruit. We have so much recruiting stuff. We don't run 1,000 football recruiting stories on the front page. But we have a lot of stuff on the boards.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that are going on right now in football recruiting. Dina knows exactly what's going on. Mm-hmm. David, we ran a piece Wednesday morning. David went over the Rivals Top 25 for the class 24 in basketball was put out. We have confirmed 15 of those kids Carolina contacted when the contact opened up on the 15th of the month. And David just got a ton of intel, and you can only access it if you subscribe. So just $8.33 a month, which right now is a heck of a lot better value than it was before. And it was a great value before. Yeah, so people should hop on board.
It really is. I'll say this: it's cheaper than a beer in Kenan Stadium during a football game. I want to say a beer is $10 to $12 at Kenan Stadium during a game.
Well, I went to a concert with my wife a couple of weeks ago in Charlotte, and her mixed drink was like this. It was 22. Well,
oh God,
it seems pretty big with it. $22. I got a beer that was $13.75. Telling
you, man, $8.33 a month. You just get so much content over here, and like I just said, there's a ton of stuff we make premium content, or AK is on the boards, and if you want to see that stuff, which is a lot to do with recruiting, like he said, you have to be signed up. So guys, click the link below, sign up. It'll take you right to the website. Sign up for just $8.33 a month. Rivals also has an awesome app that I've really been pushing as well that makes it so easy to get notifications about articles and things that we publish directly to your home screen on your phone. So download that too if you haven't already. And if you do decide to sign up, please come join our awesome family over here. Like I said, where you can be an insider too. Okay, AJ, let's dive into. I want to start with the ACC news. I know you put out a little piece out on TarHeelIllustrated.com. A little release from the ACC kind of talking about what it means. And I'm going to give a quick synopsis, and then I'll let you kind of dive into a little bit more about what it means for football moving forward. I personally like the decision. I think it makes a ton of sense. And here's kind of what happened. So for those who maybe haven't heard in ACC news, this coming season will be the last season football-wise where there is a coastal and Atlantic division. Obviously, Carolina been in the coastal division right now. This is the last year of it. Starting in 2023, it's switching to a 3-5-5 format. So essentially, Carolina is going to have, I think what they call it, permanent partners, permanent rivals.
Partners,
that they're going to play. Those three kind of makes sense. I mean, I think when you hear the names of NC State, Duke, and UVA, kind of seems like that makes the most sense in terms of, who's Carolina's kind of, rivalry game, oldest rivalry in the South with UVA, and obviously NC State and Duke are always going to be rivalry games as well. So I think those three make a ton of sense. But essentially the big news would be that the coastal division, the Atlantic division are no longer going to be around starting in 2023. So AJ, what does that mean for ACC football? I know Coastal and Atlantic divisions are kind of staples of the conference when it comes to football. Like I said, I personally like the decision. But what are your overall thoughts on that transitioning into that in 2023 and kind of what it means for ACC football moving forward?
Well, I knew that this was coming, but I thought they were going to announce it closer to the ACC kickoff in Charlotte, which is in 3 weeks from when we're recording this. So I actually had a piece that I wrote, sort of a column style piece that I wrote a few weeks ago. I was going to run it on July 4th, saying, here's the format. This is what you need to do. This is why this needs to happen. So I may still run it. I'm not sure, but you know how we are. We write something and we're kind of attached to it. We hate to not use it, but the synopsis is pretty simple. ACC football had gotten boring. Carolina at Pitt on Thursday night is boring.
It's true.
I've been to all those games. 22,000 people show up. It's cold. The games are usually really good. Those two teams, they combine some different things and they play competitive. They're not blowouts. They're pretty good games. Usually they're both decent teams. Certainly with good players, a lot of good players. Noah Taylor told us last week, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, though, that he told us a perception that Virginia players had about North Carolina was basically gross underachievers, always more talented than the record, but still they were talented guys that would go up there and play, but the games have gotten kind of boring. So this mixes it up. I think this is really good for TV. They can enhance their TV package. They need to revamp the TV package because they're getting killed. And they're tied into this thing through 2036, which is also the term of the grant of rights deal, in which any school that wants to leave the league, they go to a new conference. The ACC gets their TV revenue from the new conference through 2036. What the league can do now is they can go to the networks and say, hey, we're going to get more variety in our matchups. We're not going to have Pitt and Carolina every year. We're not going to have Syracuse and Wake every year. We're going to have a lot more variety. Everyone's going to play Clemson a couple of times every 4 years. Everyone's going to play FSU. Everyone's going to play the Hokies. So there's a lot of variety. I think it makes it more intriguing. Fans are going to see different uniforms and programs come in to their stadiums. They're going to go different. Carolina hadn't been to Louisville since Louisville joined the league. Well, Carolina goes to Louisville in a couple of years. So you need to see more of that. If you're going to be a conference, you've got to play each other. You got to have familiarity. It's good for TV ratings. It's good for interest, just a general interest in the program. I think it will help at the gate when you have a variety of programs coming in, and by having 3 permanent partners. In some cases, like with Carolina, those are 3 natural rivals that are already there. There's no way they could have done this with 3 permanent partners and had Carolina lined up with anybody else. You must maintain the South Solstice rivalry. You must maintain Carolina Duke. You must maintain Carolina and NC State. Now, for NC State, they have the hate fest against Carolina, but they're also paired with Clemson. A lot of people are saying that that's a negative for the Wolfpack. I think it's a great thing for NC State. They are a rival of Clemson's. The Textile Bowl was preserved. It should have been preserved. And, State's gotten close at times when Clemson's been really good. I think for NC State, when you've got them on your schedule every year and you got Carolina on your schedule every year, that's a great thing for the Wolfpack to sell. So some of the schools, they're going to have to, create some rivalries out of this, and maybe that will help with Louisville. Louisville doesn't really have any rivals in the ACC. I like that they kept some of the Big East team, the former Big East schools, sort of partnered with Syracuse has BC and Pitt among its 3. Boston College, I'm trying to look at this right now. I don't see what Boston College has. They have, if you have it in front of you, read that to me. My screen's not showing it for some reason.
I don't currently have it in front of me right now.
Yeah, well, Louisville's Georgia Tech, Miami, and Virginia, and that's kind of hard because of where they're located. And who knows, maybe if the ACC brings in a 16th school, that'll change things. Although
BC's Miami, Pitt, and Syracuse.
That's right. Okay, well, there you go. You got Pitt and Syracuse, plus Miami's an old Big East rival. And
absolutely.
There's the whole connection there, the Catholic connection, Boston and Miami, all that stuff makes a lot of sense. I love that they did this. I love the variety. The league was getting stale. In the end, though, teams need to win. Florida State needs to become Florida State. Miami needs to be Miami. Virginia Tech needs to be relevant. Enter Sandman has to be more than just a couple of moments. Then people tune into something else. North Carolina needs to be the sleeping giant. It needs to or no longer be the sleeping giant. It must awaken. Georgia Tech has a tremendous football history that they've got to do something there to fix it. It's a mess right now. It's not going to work under Jeff Collins. Virginia's a program that should be decent. NC State's a program that should always be competitive. Louisville's a program that has flared up several times. It needs to get close to flaring up on bad years and flare up every once in a while. If those things happen, and by the way, Syracuse was outstanding in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. BC was once relevant. There are programs here that have won consistently not all that long ago. So these schools need to invest in the right coaching staffs. The ones that still are a little bit behind in facilities must spend the money on the facilities. They need to invest. And if they start winning, then this is going to be crazy because you can have all kinds of different variety of good teams coming in and out of these different stadiums every year. I think this was a smart move. Jim Phillips has done due diligence and working this thing out. Visiting, he's gone to every campus multiple times. He's gotten to know the schools. He's gotten to learn about the culture. Each school has its own unique culture as an institution and athletically. He's gotten to understand these things. So they just didn't slap a bunch of names on paper here. They spent a lot of time on this, and I think they got it as right as you could possibly get it.
Agreed. I'm not going to harp on it too much more, but I think my biggest criticism and a lot of people's for ACC football, like you talked about, is just there's teams that never play each other. You mentioned Carolina basically never playing Louisville. I mean, Clemson, a team that Carolina's not played that often. When you consider how far the campuses are, it's not that far, but they really never play each other in football. And then another one, Clemson, Miami, they've only played, I think Clemson's only played at Miami one time. That was in 2010 or one time since 2010. So there's a lot of other programs that, really good programs in football that just never meet each other in the conference. And that can get boring. I do agree. And I think it has gotten a little bit stale in that respect. And when you have a conference that, like you said, has a lot of good programs that have flared up before, have been really good before, maybe a little bit down right now, I think mixing it up and allowing everybody to play each other on their home field every 4 years is just something that makes a ton of sense for ACC football.
Well, and I think
got a little stale for sure.
Yeah, and I think we'll avoid Carolina playing non-conference games against Wake Forest in the future, which was stupid.
That never made sense to me. I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised if Wake and State maybe do something, because the one drawback there, if you're a Wake and State fan, they've been playing every year since the early 1900s.
Yeah, so
they're going to have years where they don't play now. But Texas and Texas A&M survived not playing each other anymore. Nebraska and Oklahoma survived not playing each other. Stuff changes. I think this is for the better of the league. And quite frankly, if you're NC State, okay, we're not playing Wake anymore. We like that history. That's a nice little thing, but it gives state opportunities to play much different schools as well. Another thing I want to see happen is I still want to see the FCS games eliminated in scheduling, and you got to play a couple of P5s. Although I do believe that eventually when the ACC adds to the conference, that they're going to have to go to a 9-game schedule. And the 9-game schedule is going to make sense, especially when you eliminate the FCS game. Mm-hmm. The FCS games just shouldn't count.
Yeah,
I understand why I understand why coaches like them. And, I've asked coaches before, like, well, those schools need, they need to be able to fund themselves. It's not Power 5 teams' responsibility to fund Southern Conference schools. That's not their job.
No.
But they want those wins. They want to get one win closer to bowl eligibility and stuff. But I think that this is the right step for the league. I'm excited about it. We're going to get more interesting matchups. It's going to be a little bit more creative in the league. But they got to get better on the field. Like I said, Jacob, if they don't get better on the field, then none of this matters. People aren't going to show up no matter what. Just because you get a different uniform rolling in or a different helmet rolling in doesn't mean people are going to show up just for that. It'll help some, but you got to get better. And I do think the league is actually close to turning the corner at a couple of different programs. We'll get into that at a different time.
Yeah, I do agree. I couldn't agree, any more on that, AJ. So, yeah, let's move on to Carolina. And for those who don't know, I'm sure if you're watching this, you've seen all the videos we've kind of been putting out over the last week or so from Carolina's big, I guess we'll call it summer football media day that you guys had last week. I know THI was well represented over there as well. And, 22 interviews, talked to every assistant except Larry Porter, who was out of town at that point. Even got to talk to Patrick Sudes, the new GM for Carolina, Mac Brown, obviously, as well, and 11 players. So it was just a huge, huge media day for Carolina football. I know you guys got a ton of great information out of it. And I know we've kind of talked off camera about just how important and how great it is to be able to have that access in the middle of the summer, about a month away from fall camp, kind of You learn kind of what's happened, where they're at right now, and kind of what to expect moving into fall camp and moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and list the players they talked to as well, just so people know. Brian Anderson, Tony Grimes, Jacoby Criswell, Drake May, Awesome Richards, Josh Downs, Noah Taylor, Miles Murphy, Reva Hosick, British Brooks, and Cedric Gray. So a really nice list of kids right there. And I know we're rolling out these, continuing to roll these out on our YouTube channel. So keep it locked over there if you want to go see those interviews as well. So AJ, before we kind of dive into specifics about it, what was just your overall thoughts on being back in the Keenan Football Center, being able to talk and interact with people in person, and just being able to get, the amount of press and media availability you guys were able to get last week?
Well, we got some after the spring game, and then we were back about 10 days later where we got Mac, Phil Longo, and Gene Chizik.
Yep.
Okay, gave them a chance to absorb spring practice and have some stuff for us to fuel us for a couple months going up to last week. But yeah, last week was great because all the different players, it was normal. Mm-hmm. We got to do our work on the 5th floor of the football center afterward, which was
what
nice.
A throwback, man.
You remember those days?
Those were the good old days, AJ. I don't care what anybody says. Those were the good old days. Those were fantastic.
The only drawback, and I don't mind saying this, they've got to do something about the acoustics in there. They've changed.
I did notice that.
They've renovated the first floor big time, and we've been downstairs after the spring game 10 days later when we had Mac, Longo, and Chizik. And then last week we're down there and the acoustics are bad. People have a hard time hearing the questions. We hear echoes in there.
Well, it's in like an open area.
It's an open space.
Yeah.
And they, on the 5th floor, was where we did the pressers for years. Mm-hmm. And it's built for that. It's totally wired and built for that. It was a lot better. So I know they're working on some stuff and they're making some changes.
I'm sure they'll get that figured out.
I'm positive it will improve. But so if you haven't listened to the interviews, just understand it's kind of hard to hear the questions sometimes. But aside from that, it was great being there because we're very fortunate that we cover a program that's very open with the media. There are programs out there. This expression, Jacob. Those coaches who are think that they're planning the D-Day invasion all the time. One of my
favorite
just don't give much access. And I think it's kind of funny because Mac will tell you, they all know everything about you. They scout you. Everyone's great at scouting. So there's not a whole lot you can really hide from them. Mm-hmm. So I do like the access. I appreciate the access. I think they recognize that the more I've got a blower guy out here.
I can't hear him if that makes you feel any better.
Well, you're going to hear him in a second because it sounds like a truck that's about to run me over. It's important to the fans that there's access because the more the fans can identify with the players and learn about the players, the better. I've said for a couple of years when we've talked a lot about this, a lot of this stuff, just conversations we have in press rooms, you've been involved in a lot of those, that there are two things that North Carolina football needs that North Carolina basketball has. Okay. And this is part of what Mac's trying to do. Number one, football losses have to hurt. Mm-hmm. Basketball losses hurt Carolina fans. They're in pain, trouble sleeping, what's going on, fear that things are not right. I told you all last season, I spent so much of the season pulling people away from the ledge. The ones that didn't think Hubert was the right guy. And then, of course, when they're really, really good, they get totally out of whack with their expectations. You got to nudge them toward the ledge some, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing. So losses have to hurt. I do think the Virginia Tech loss in football hurt last year. But after that, it was the old mindset. Well, they just stink. It's never going to happen for us. It's a different mindset dealing with a football loss as opposed to a basketball loss. Mm-hmm. The other thing is identifying with the players. Carolina fans identify with Sam because they referred to him as Sam. Just like they usually refer to basketball players in the first name.
Yeah.
If Bryce Johnson was there, he's Bryce. Marcus Page was there, he's Marcus. Luke May was there, he's Lucas. Right now, it's Caleb or just Mondo.
Yeah.
RJ. When the football players, and outside the first couple, when fans start identifying with them just by their first name. If you're talking Carolina football defense and about the simplification that they've installed, which is vastly different from what they did under Jay Bateman, and a couple fans are talking to us, I think Cedric's going to be a lot better this year because he doesn't have to call as much. Because Jeremiah Gemmel last year, if you go back, he's constantly barking stuff out even when the ball is being snapped, often trying to get guys lined up, trying to get communication going because they have 3,000 things that they're schemed for, and the ball snapped, right? So I just said his name. That's Cedric Gray. So you don't want fans saying, boy, that Gray is doing a good job out there. You want them to say Cedric because you want it to personalize more. So I'm giving you a very long response here about last week. One of the values for the program of giving us all those kids and giving them to us one by one so we can isolate each one of them is to get fans more familiar with them, see what they look like, see how they sound. Some of these kids are really interesting. If Carolina fans haven't really heard Cedric Gray talk before, do so. He's a really articulate, cerebral kid. In fact, Gene Chizik called him, or Tommy Thigpen called him one of the most cerebral kids he's ever coached. And he's a terrific athlete. So that's one of the reasons they do. Those are some of the reasons why they do this. And it makes a lot of sense to me. And as a guy who covers the team, I always want content, as you know, Jacob. I'm always pushing. We need content. We need fresh content. So they gave us a ton. And here we are to talk about it. And there were a lot of really interesting things that came out. If you're a Carolina football fan, you don't really have a lot of things to wonder about the program right now. There is so much access and we report so much stuff. You have a pretty good idea about where the program stands, where the position groups stand, where Gene Chizik's new defense is and how the players have received it. All that stuff is out there. So if you don't know these things, then you got to pay attention a little bit more. You got to watch these videos, read our site, read all the different many people that cover this program because the access is plentiful. And the information is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such an interesting year for Carolina football. I was actually talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago. He's a guy that I don't bet. Just something I'm not very interested in. But he's a guy that, loves to, bet on games and seasons and all that stuff. And he was talking to me about Carolina. He's like, I think the line came out at 7.5 wins or something like that. We had a, 30-minute conversation about the team because I think it's such an interesting year for Carolina football because you've got a defense that returns so many guys with a new coordinator that's been successful, not only at Carolina before, but across the country, won a national championship as a head coach. You'd expect that defense to be so much better, but right now we don't know. And on the offensive side of the ball, you got an offense that brings back some kids, but also lost some really important players as well. But you've got to, until you figure out that quarterback position and how that's going to go, you don't really know how good the offense is to be. So we had a very interesting conversation about, I don't really know in a lot of ways what to. I think this team could be really good this year. And I think this team could struggle some when you look at, both sides of the ball. So, I say that because I think it's such an interesting year for Carolina football. And I think it's really good to be able to have that media availability in the summer to kind of see where the program's at right now. So to kind of move the conversation forward a little bit, because I'm not going to hit on this forever. We could sit here and probably talk about, all individual things that happened for over an hour, but for time purposes, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, there was some things that stood out from the press conference. Anything you can kind of let us know about, like you mentioned, that stood out, or maybe some of your biggest takeaways from what some of the coaches or players had to say?
Well, the simplified scheme on defense, it's not just, remember we said last year, look, you and I talked about it constantly last year, Jacob. Yeah. And we said a bunch of times, the value in this season is Mac Brown's going to learn about what he doesn't want. Mm-hmm. Right? So you take a few steps backwards, go 6-7 in a year. You were top 10 to start the year. They were one of the big underachievers according to national perception last year, right? But Mac learned a lot. He learned what he doesn't want. And he gave that approach multiple chances, ultimately the bowl game being the final straw. One more chance to prove this thing is going to work. And it didn't work. Kids weren't ready. They just didn't look prepared, didn't have a lot of verve in that game, and they paid the price they looked at. So a change was made. I don't think anybody sits around and says, hey, let's throw shade on Jay Bateman, but inadvertently, some of that is occurring when they talk about the defense from the scheme. Cedric Gray, Tommy Thigpen said the other day, you hear different players in people in the program publicly say, Des Evans at 6'5", 6'6", 260 shouldn't be covering running backs. 30 yards downfield. That's throwing shade on the previous scheme.
Yeah.
Dez said, I'm home. He's got a hand on the ground. He's going to go get the quarterback. We kept saying last year, they got to let dudes be dudes. And when you over scheme, you're taking away the dude factor, in my opinion. Gene Chizik's defense is very simple. There are a lot fewer calls to make, so they're not going to get crossed in miscommunication in pre-snap. They're going to talk, but they're not going to have 35 different things to choose from. This isn't Baskin Robbins here, right? Or 31 or whatever they are, right?
Yeah, 31 flavors.
It's 7, 8, maybe 9 different things. And that's their package. That's where they're going to work from. And it allows guys to win their individual battles more. I thought it was interesting that one of the themes of a discussion that we had last week was, with offenses changing so much the last 10 years and just bells and whistles all over the place and pre-snap eye candy and everything you can imagine, that the defenses, the reactions by defenses across the country was, well, we have to out-scheme it. So it's sort of like the nuclear arms race. You keep building when the defense is like, oh my gosh, we've got to do more. Instead, I think what we're going to start seeing, and this is sort of what Chizik's doing, let them do all that crap. It comes down to football 101. Win at the line of scrimmage, win your individual battles. And if you do that, it doesn't matter what the scheme is. You have a chance at being successful. That's going to be the approach. Last year, Georgia Tech scored a touchdown in Atlanta when the ball was snapped at around the 4-yard line and not one Carolina player was ready. They weren't ready. In fact, when the quarterback scored, he took it in untouched. He turned around and wasn't sure if he should celebrate because he wasn't sure the play counted. Nobody on their side was ready. But the play counted. It was a touchdown. I don't think you're going to see that this year. The simplification in scheme, the simplification in the communication and the calls and the breadth of the scheme, all of that should make this a better unit. So that's the thing that I took away, number one. Number two, I asked Gene Chizik, and coaches don't like to compare, so sometimes it's a little bit unfair, but I thought he would give us something, and he did. I asked him, I said, what are one or two differences in what you inherited now on that side of the ball as opposed to what you inherited when you came in after the 2014 season? He immediately went to the depth and talent of the defensive line. Got a lot more now. Got a lot. Then he said, you know what? We got more depth, more talent in the secondary. So that was pretty emphatic. Maybe not so the case at linebacker because they're kind of thin at the middle at linebacker, but they got some good players there. Mm-hmm. But they were pretty strong at linebacker when he arrived before. But where are football games won? What did we just say? Simplification, football 101, dudes being dudes, win your battles. It begins up front. So I think he's really excited about what they have. Loves the young, raw, very talented kids in the program. Keyshawn Silver trying to figure it out. Ritzy having a year under his belt. And that kid named Shaw, which everybody just loves in the program. And he's doing all the right things the right way. So he's on the track toward becoming the guy that everybody thinks he can become. He didn't have those kind of dudes when he took over the first time. But he's got that now. So those two things alone tell me that Carolina fans should expect improvement. Gene Chizik won a national title as a defensive coordinator for Mac. He won one as a head coach. He is considered one of the great defensive minds in the sport. So it's not a stretch to think that there should be a significant improvement on that side of the ball. Those were the two biggest takeaways for me coming out of there. If there's a third one, it's that as much as we've heard some things that there very well could be a 2-quarterback situation the first few weeks into the season. The battle between Drake and Jacoby could last through the Georgia State game. Mm-hmm. And then they have an open date, and then they got Notre Dame. That's the time when the coaches make a hard decision, and they give somebody the ball for the Fighting Irish at home. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if things play out that way. I also wouldn't be surprised they name a starter by August 15th.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be May eventually. Mm-hmm. Lots of things I'm hearing, it's probably leaning toward May, but Mac was very adamant. People I've talked to privately last week in the program, people that know things, were very adamant saying this is not a situation that has been close to being decided just yet. Mm-hmm. It could play out into the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, that's obviously the biggest storyline going into it, and that's what people want to hear. And it will be, I think, a very interesting storyline to follow in fall camp when, that starts about a month from now, because I mean, it doesn't matter what level you're playing football, man. If you don't have a quarterback, you're going to struggle. So that's something Carolina's got to figure out. And I will say, as a caveat to that, I think Carolina's in good hands with either of those guys. It just depends who, can step up and take over that position. AJ, last thing I want to ask you before we wrap this one up real quickly. A lot of optimism around the program. Was that kind of the vibe at the press conference? A lot of excitement?
Yeah, I think that they're more relaxed because there was a lot of pressure last year because of the hype. Mm-hmm. And Mac said that he knew last summer that that club may not have had the right constitution to be able to deal with that. And they weren't that polished in certain areas that you need to be polished in to live up to top 10 hype.
Yeah, and it was something that was new to, all the players.
But
you know what I mean?
But he didn't think that they had great leadership.
Yeah, and I think that was pretty evident, as the season went on. I'll just put it that way.
Well, we saw that in Blacksburg. Like, there was nobody that could rally the troops there.
No, they
didn't have any leaders in that game.
No.
And then you go down to Atlanta, it's another case. In fact, he has said previously a couple of times that as much as Blacksburg exposed them, Georgia Tech was sort of the exclamation mark that they're just not that good.
That was a bad day.
Because you don't go down there and just suck the way they sucked down there.
What, did Georgia Tech win like one game after that? Maybe. I don't even know if they won a game.
They were Georgia. I knew that night. I told you there are 3 things that night. Georgia Tech stunk.
Yeah, they were not a good football team.
And they just beat the living snot out of Carolina, and Carolina beat the living snot out of themselves. Mm-hmm. Sam was terrible that game. He was terrible 2 of the first 4 games last year.
Yeah.
They were discombobulated. That's the night. Remember, in Georgia Tech's quarterback situation, the regular starter had been cleared 2 weeks earlier, and they knew he was going to play some. And Jeremiah Gimlet acknowledged after the game that they never prepared for him.
Yeah, it's wild.
And that was as unimpressive a post game as I can recall in my career.
Yeah, it was bad.
And that was sort of, okay, well, this isn't happening. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was South Carolina, the last few minutes at NC State. The club that did that stuff was the same club that was in Blacksburg, the same club that was in Mercedes-Benz Dome. They just never really figured it out. They had a couple of flare-ups. I thought that the staff did a pretty good job of keeping them ready to go. They were competitive at Notre Dame. They could have won the Pitt game on the road. They did take care of Wake Forest when they were top 10. But I think that things are different now. Max said he really likes the things he didn't like about last year's team. He likes that about this year. Mm-hmm. The things that he's hearing from the leaders, there's more chatter. And what's interesting is 2 of the leaders are Corey Gaynor and Noah Taylor, who came from other ACC programs that didn't like Carolina. Noah Taylor hated Carolina.
Yeah,
hated him.
I can imagine.
And he said that the guys on Virginia's team didn't respect him at all. I mean, I'm not going to throw a word out there that I thought he wanted to say but didn't last week, but he said that they thought Carolina, a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys, and always underachieve. Mm-hmm. And then he said, I show up here, and then they're kind of different guys than I thought. And I love it and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's a little bit of a different tude. I think there's a little bit more of an edge, a little bit more of a glass chewing mentality in the program now than
more talent probably all over the board than there was.
There's more talent. It's younger and it's getting older. It's getting more seasoned. Mm-hmm. And the value of knowledge. Mac learned what he didn't want. And here's a guy who's in his 70s. He's a Hall of Famer. He doesn't have to coach. He doesn't need the money, and he's still learning. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love the fact that he's learning, and he acknowledges it. He's open about it. He tries new things. I think Carolina fans are in really good shape with him at the helm because of that. He's not rigid. Rigid coaches in football usually end up coiled up in a corner waiting for the axe to come down. I've seen it 1,000 times in my career. We just covered it a few years ago. I like Larry personally, but that's what happened.
No, it's a fact. Yeah. At the end of the day, I think it's an exciting year. I think Carolina fans should be excited. I think they should be optimistic. Like I said, I think there's still some question marks going into the season that we're going to continue to cover.
A lot.
throughout fall camp, and there's going to be a lot of storylines coming out of there, and it's going to be a fun one to cover. But AJ, I think this is a good place to wrap this one up. A lot of Carolina football discussions in here, ACC as well. And guys, again, we've been putting out, AJ's been putting out a ton of stuff on Tar Heel Illustrated from the press conferences, and they continue to do so. So if you want to see those videos, you want to read some of the articles AJ's put together on that, kind of breaking it down, get a little more perspective on what happened last week and during that huge Carolina football media day. Go to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Check us out. Some of that content's going to be premium. You can sign up for just $8.33 a month. You can be a Carolina insider too. And again, AJ took this site over about 8 years ago now. Never raised the price, still $8.33. So guys, come join. Link is in the description below. Come join the THI family again, where you can be a Carolina insider too. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. As always, guys, we really appreciate you watching. If you're excited about the upcoming Carolina football season, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button below. Let's see how many likes we can get on this video. So maybe we can hit triple digits. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Again, guys, make sure you head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Keep it locked over there. Like, share, subscribe. Hit that notification bell as well. I know it's the summer, but we still upload a ton of videos every single week. And you get a notification if you hit that bell every time we do so. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.